Hello, this lecture is on Ayn Rand. It will cover her objectivist epistemology, and then at the end of the video will be analytical synthetic distinction by W.V. Quine. Ayn Rand, 1967 CE. An analysis of Ayn. We will go over introduction, a summation of cognition and measurement, concept formation, abstraction from abstractions, concepts of consciousness, definitions, axiomatic concepts, the cognitive role of concepts, consciousness, and identity, which are elements of the objectivist theory of concepts. Quote, all knowledge is in terms of concepts. If these concepts correspond to something that is to be found in reality, they are real and humanity's knowledge has a foundation in fact. If they do not correspond to anything in reality, they are not real, and humanity's knowledge is of mere figments of their own imagination. End quote. That quote was by Edward C. Moore in American Pragmatism on Pierce, James, and Dewey, published in 1961. The issue of concepts is philosophy's central issue. Since humanity's knowledge is acquired and held in conceptual form, the validity of humankind's knowledge depends on the validity of concepts. Concepts are abstractions, and everything that humankind perceives is concrete and particular, not abstract and universal. To what precisely do concepts refer? To something that exists, or something that is real, or to the mere inventions of a human's mind, arbitrary constructs that cannot claim to represent knowledge. Question. What in reality corresponds to the concept of that thing in your mind? In history, there are four schools of thought on the answer. First, there are the extreme realists, or Platonists, who hold that abstractions exist as real archetypes or entities in another dimension of reality, and that these concretes we perceive are only their imperfect reflections. The concretes, the particulars, evoke the abstractions in our mind, and this is what Plato thinks. He thinks that the concretes evoke memory of the archetypes which we had formerly known in a new dimension. Okay? The second are called the modern realists, whose ancestor is Aristotle. And they hold that abstractions do exist in reality, but only in concretes themselves, in the form of metaphysical essences, and that our concepts refer to these essences. The third is the nominalists, who hold that all of our ideas are only images of concretes, and that abstractions are only arbitrary groupings of concretes on the basis of resemblances. And the fourth group are called the conceptualists, who share the nominalist view that abstractions have no actual basis in reality, but hold that concepts exist in our minds as ideas, not images. So the problem might appear esoteric, but history reminds us that the fate of human societies, of knowledge, of science, of progress, and of every human life depends on this. I here refer to you to Ann's work for the new intellectual. Remember this proposition in the form of an axiom. Quote, existence exists. The statement implies that something exists which one perceives, and that one exists possessing consciousness, consciousness being the faculty of perceiving that which exists. End quote. And that was a quote from Anne from her book Atlas Shrugged. Quote, and from Objectivist Epistemology, to negate humanity's mind, it is the conceptual level of a human's consciousness that has to be invalidated. Under all the tortuous complexities, contradictions, equivocations, rationalizations of the post-Renaissance philosophy, the one consistent fundamental is a concerted attack on humanity's conceptual faculty. Most philosophers did not intend to invalidate conceptual knowledge. Its defenders did more to destroy it than it did its enemies. They were unable to define the nature and source of abstractions, to determine the relationship of concepts to perceptual data, to prove the validity of scientific induction, to refute the claim that their concepts were arbitrary, and that their scientific knowledge had no greater metaphysical validity. To the summation of objectivist epistemology. Entry 1, cognition and measurement. The base of all of humankind's knowledge is the perceptual level of awareness. Humans grasp the evidence of their senses and apprehend reality. The ability to regard things as units is humankind's distinctive method of cognition. And cognition here just means acquiring knowledge. So a unit is an existing thing regarding as a separate member of a group of two or more similar things. Measurement is the identification of a quantitative relationship by the means of a standard. The purpose of measurement, therefore, is to expand the extent of human knowledge beyond what is directly perceivable. Part 2, concept formation. Similarity is the relationship between two or more things that exist which possess the same characteristics, but in different measure or of degree. The process consists of the principle that these existing things must exist in some quantity, but may exist in any quality or quantity. A concept is a mental integration of two or more units possessing the same distinguishing characteristics with their particular measurements being admitted. Part 3, abstraction from abstractions. When concepts are integrated into a wider concept, they serve as units and are treated epistemologically, as if each were a single mental concrete particular, always remembering that metaphysically, i.e. in reality, each unit stands for an unlimited number of concrete particulars of a certain kind. When concepts are integrated into broader concepts, the new concept includes all the characteristics of its constituent units, but their distinguishing characteristics are regarded as admitted measurements, and one of their common characteristics becomes the distinguishing characteristic of the new concept. When a concept is subdivided into more narrow concepts, its distinguishing characteristic is retained and given a more specific range of narrow measurements, or it is combined with an additional characteristic to form the individual distinguishing characteristics of the new concepts. Part 4, concepts of consciousness. Every state of consciousness involves two fundamental attributes: the content or object of awareness and the action or process of thought in regard to that content. The intensity of a psychological process is measured on a comparative scale. Concepts pertaining to cognition or acquired knowledge are measured by the scope of their factual content and the length of the conceptual chain required in order to comprehend it. Concepts pertaining to evaluation are measured by reference to a person's hierarchy of values. This involves establishing a graded relationship of actions to a standard of value of means to an ends. A category of concepts of consciousness consists of concepts pertaining to the products of consciousness, i.e. knowledge, and concepts of method, i.e. logic. Part 5, definitions. A definition is a statement that identifies the nature of a concept's parts. A correct definition must specify the distinguishing characteristics of the parts, the differentia, and indicate the category of existence from which they were differentiated, the genus. The essential distinguishing characteristics of the parts and the proper defining characteristics of the concept must be fundamental. And as the process of concept formation is contextual, so all definitions are contextual. The designation of a single characteristic depends on the context of humankind's knowledge. A primitive definition, if correct, does not contradict a more advanced one. The latter merely expands the former. An objective definition, valid for all humanity, is determined according to all the relevant knowledge available at the particular stage of humankind's development. Definitions are contextually absolute. A definition is false if it does not specify the known or if it contradicts the known. Every concept stands for a number of implicit propositions. A definition is the condensation of a vast body of observations. Its validity depends on the truth or falsehood of these observations, as represented by the designation of a concept's essential defining characteristics. The truth or falsehood of all of humankind's conclusions, inferences, and knowledge lives or dies on the truth or falsehood of its definitions. Part 6, axiomatic concepts. An axiomatic concept is the identification of a primary fact of reality, which is implicit in all facts and in all knowledge. They are perceived or experienced directly, but comprehended conceptually. The primary axiomatic concepts are existence, identity, and consciousness. They serve as constants, as cognitive and epistemological guidelines. They embrace the entire field of humankind's awareness, delimiting it from the unreality to which conceptual errors often lead. An axiomatic concept must be accepted and used even in the process of any attempt to deny it. So axiomatic concepts are the foundation of objectivity. Part 7, the cognitive role of concepts. At the current time, the extent to what an individual human can hold in the focus of its conscious awareness at any given moment in time is extremely limited. The essence of a human's cognitive ability or power is its ability to reduce a vast amount of information to a minimum, the task performed by its conceptual faculty. Concepts represent condensations of knowledge that subsume all the characteristics of their reference, the known and the yet to be discovered. This permits further study in the division of cognitive disciplines. In the process of determining conceptual classifications, neither the essential differences nor the essential similarities among what exists may be ignored once they have been observed. Concepts are not to be multiplied beyond necessity, nor are they to be integrated in disregard of necessity. Part 8. Consciousness and identity. The dreadful assault on humankind's conceptual faculty has been accelerating the last 300 years, widening the spacious skies between a human's mind and reality. Humans, they neither be, at least not yet, infallible nor omniscient. They still had to discover a valid method of its own cognition. But two questions are involved in every individual's conclusion or decision. What do I know? And how do I know it? Objectivity begins with the realization that a human is an entity of a specified nature who must act accordingly, that there is no escape from its identity, that there is no space for the arbitrary in any activity of humankind, not least in the method of its own cognition, and that humans must be guided by objective criteria in forming their concepts. Humankind's existence will be liberated when they grasp that nature is to be apprehended and must be obeyed. That the rules of cognition must be derived from the nature of existence itself, and the nature of their cognitive faculty. And now we will skip over and talk about Quine, and this is his work on analytical synthetic distinction. If I claim to understand Quine. If I claim to understand Quine, he's talking about intention and extension. Natural science offers the best accounts we have of the nature of reality and how we find out about it. Thus, science provides us with our ontology and epistemology, in a Quine sense, and it's fallibist in the sense that this kind of epistemology rejects the idea that there is a philosophical platform outside science from which the assumptions, methods, and theories of science can be examined for purposes of justifying or criticizing science. As to ontology, or what exists is what is descriptible in physical terms. W.V.O. Quine was quite big on two things: what exists and what matters. For example, physics and chemistry work together to create biology, and eventually psychology, and the psychology combined with biology and ethology and primatology is evolutionary, in a sense. So, a note guided by naturalism and extensionality, it might not be sufficient for understanding a theory that it be extensional, but it is necessary. The paradigm of an extensional language is predicate logic, and it can be used in order to ascertain the ontology of any given theory by paraphrasing it into logical terms in a manner similar to a treatment of sentences containing descriptive phrases. What a theory is prepared to quantify over tells us only what the theory says exists. It does not tell us what in fact exists. If for other reasons we do not have valid and sound grounds for accepting the existence of the thing in question, well, then that is a reason for either rejecting or adjusting the theory. We use our best available scientific theories to decide what exists. This is the criteria of identity, for there is no entity without identity. We've just gone over that. It's an axiomatic concept. Axiomatic concept is something that is completely true and will always be true. And like existence, identity is always going to be true. So problems in regards to the analytic synthetic distinction. So why are there differences between analytic and synthetic truths? Well, first, analytic truths are those grounded in meanings that are independently of matters of fact. And synthetic truths are those truths that are grounded in fact. Analytic truths are meanings independent of matters of fact. Synthetic truths are those truths that are grounded in fact. So I reject that there is a distinction between analytic and synthetic truth because the very idea of analyticity in its essence indicates the intentional notion of meanings. Due to another question, what sort of things are meanings? Okay? So in truth, there are two kinds of analytical statements. There are logically true tautologies, and then there are other non-tautologous statements. The latter non-tautologous statements, although not as it itself stands as a logical truth, can be shown to be one by demonstrating that the terms in it are synonyms. Brandon Papster is foolish to explain synonymy by definition if definition explained by synonymy is the case, but definition can prescribe synonymy in the case of conventional introductions of new technical notations. Synonymous words convey a likeness or a sameness, quality or quantity, and either way, intersubstitutivity is still insufficient. It is necessary that necessity presupposes a notation for analyticity, but this is deeply suspect for Quine. For if there is not a distinction between analytic and synthetic statements, because of the very notion of the former is coherent, it follows that all statements are synthetic. But Quine here tells us that we should not omit logic and mathematics. They are also included. Quine here talks about set theory. If you want to learn about set theory, you can look up Quine's work, Word and Object. He's written on all kinds of other books on it. This is just a primer. So when Quine talks about extension, he's talking about inside context. He's talking about with what exists. He's talking about, firstly, contacts with the world, and then things that are caused by the world, and then changes that are in the world. So, and he says that when we have contacts with the world and things caused by the world, and understand things caused by the world and things that are changing in the world, we can have a revised knowledge. And so the explanation of an extension that we are directly in contact with the world through our sensory stimulations caused by the world, and therefore our statements are revisable in light of that experience. The question number 2 is why should we reject reductionism? Reductio is the belief that each meaningful statement is equivalent to some sort of logical construct upon terms which refer to immediate experience. So reductionism's thesis is that individual statements in scientific theories are supported or undermined by particular observations relevant to them. Our statements about the external world face the tribunal of sense experience or sense data, not individually, but only as a corporate body, as a species. And so scientific statements are not separately vulnerable to adverse observations because it is only jointly as a theory that they imply their observational consequences. And therefore, meaning is a stimulation when a comparison of your sense and sense match the same stimuli conditions of other people. Naturalism and existentiality provide clarity and determinateness, but both are lost when intentional concepts of meanings and their modalities are invoked. So I hope that these new tools for exploring language, thought, knowledge will be utilized as progress is made in the natural sciences. Like I said before, there are, for other books written by Quine, he wrote from a logical point of view. He wrote a paper called Two Dogmas of Empiricism, and then he wrote, like I said before, he wrote another book called Word and Object. And if you want to really get into it, you can see Saul Kripke, another philosopher, on provision of a semantics for quantified modal logic, using notations as what constitutes possible worlds, defining necessarily as true in all possible worlds, and possibly as true in at least one possible world. That's it for this video. Just got under 20 minutes. Like I said, this whole series is going to be on a lot of different philosophers, so I'm not going to go in depth on a lot of people. This is probably the only video I'm going to do on Quine. It's probably the only video that I'm going to do on Ayn Rand. But I hope you enjoyed the video. I apologize how long it is, but if you can watch it till the end, great, good for you. I hope you learned something, and thank you.